we're just going to jump straight into it. And the first question that we ask every single guest that we have on the podcast is, what is your one piece of advice to help blokes be 1% better every day?
I guess my advice thinking about that would be know what your priorities are. I find you can have a lot of things to do, but unless you set the priorities, you're never going to get anything done. You're going to go around in circles trying to just do a little bit here, a little bit there, focus on what's at the top first.
And in our last episode, we were talking a little bit about goal setting. It was the first of, actually, I think it was the 1st of January when we had our first sort of, our first episode, and we spoke about what were our goals for 2023. So, yeah, what are your sort of, I guess, your thoughts on goal setting? Do you sort of do that sort of goal setting type thing, or is it more just even understanding what those priorities sort of look like?
Probably not so much goal setting, but knowing or keeping a list of everything that needs to be done, working through each of those and listing them in order of what needs to be done. I find you can get overwhelmed with everything going on in life, whether it's work, home, projects at home. You've got to get a balance. You've got to balance everything that you're doing with what needs to be done, but you also got to allow unexpected things to come in, whether it's your family needs help with gardening or whatever else. You've got to allow for that, but the big ticket items, keeping a list and prioritising what needs to be done first.
And with those big ticket items, like, do you want to complete them as well? Do you think that's important to make sure that it's been completed to move on to the next one?
It is. I probably do a terrible job of completing things. But, yeah, I guess setting yourself timelines as well. It is quite easy to move from one thing to another, and I guess that's where having a list, you go back to it and say, well, I've moved on to the item 2 and I should have been finishing item 1.
It's those SMART goals really, isn't it?
Yeah.
To quote some business speak, but yeah, the specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time-based.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you don't have that, like you don't have that priority list, you do get paralysed by indecision.
And you may find that your number 1 may take too long and you could get a balance between 1 and 2.
Yeah.
But I always find listing it out, having it visual instead of going around your head just thinking about everything and not actually doing anything.
The other plus with having a list and having a physical documentation of something is someone else can pick it up and maybe help out.
Yeah, yeah. And the wife asks you what she can do, here you go.
Number 5 and number 69.
When does that ever happen? When does your wife ever ask, hey, do you have a list of jobs that I can do?
It's not like, you can do this. Nah, I'd rather not. Only in defence tent doesn't sound interesting.
They've got the list, haven't they? That's not. I don't care about
they made the list.
They have got the list.
They've got the actual list, and they've also got that hidden list that they never tell you about, and it's sort of hidden in the cupboard somewhere. But they just know that you know what's on that list that needs to be done. Anyway, without going too far and getting ourselves in trouble with our wives and partners, it is a mental health podcast, and thank you for coming on. Just a quick intro, like let's go, just a little 1-minute intro, who you are, where you come from, what do you do for a crust, and sort of what experience do you bring to the podcast?
Yeah, okay. Northwest Coaster, I guess, of Tassie for majority of my life. Have a young family, a couple of kids, wife.
Roll us your dad stats. We talked about it last time, and I'm stealing that quote from Hamish Blake's podcast, How Are the Dad's Dad? What are your dad stats? How old are your kids?
One has just turned 2 in December, and the other one's coming up to 5 years old in March.
Crazy. Crust?
A project lead, I guess, for an underground mining company on the northwest coast here, but yeah, a global company.
Massive. That would obviously have some stress, and probably is where I guess your advice has come from, being a project lead, doing that sort of project management stuff. That would obviously have some kind of, I guess, huge stress burden for you. Like, tell us a little bit about some of the lifestyle stresses that you've had and why, I guess, that point that you made at the beginning of this podcast is so relevant to you.
Yeah, I guess different roles with the company I've been with there's definitely been some challenges. I guess things I can think about that come to mind is sleepless nights, stewing on things that need to be done, like no sleep, and then the next day you're trying to deal with the problems that you've been stressing about. It just snowballs from there. It's definitely been one of the challenges I've had over the years, and through, I guess, learnings, I've found ways to manage that.
What are those ways?
Again, prioritisation, knowing what you can do and can't do. There was a time 4 or 5 years ago where I felt I needed to do everything. I had been given responsibilities and I wanted to prove myself, not just to myself, but to, I guess, the team. I just realised I couldn't do it all. I didn't have the knowledge. I was afraid to ask for help. So,
And do you have a way to switch off from work, like on your way home? You said about sleepless nights. So is there something that you use? Do you turn the music up loud on the way home and wind the windows down while you're driving? Or do you go for a run when you get home? Or do you try and have yourself 5 minutes before you get home with the kids? I know that sometimes when I finish, and I'm lucky I work where I live, so even just closing the door and going into the lounge room, it's still hard because I haven't given myself 5 minutes from work to the kids and stuff.
Yeah, I used to be able to do that really well, and that was because I was travelling to work and travelling home every night. It was a bit easier to switch off. For the last 2 or 3 years now, I've been working from home, and I actually find it really difficult to switch off. You sit down for an hour extra, or you go out to the kids and then you go back to your desk. And I find it really hard now to switch off, and probably need to take a page out of my own book or own learnings to find some improvement areas. But after those stressful times 4 or 5 years ago, I found ways to manage. Blasting music's probably one of them, but even just listening to podcasts on the way home, thinking about something, like if you didn't have, if you had the radio on, I think you'd probably find it easier to think about work. But I found listening to the podcast just something different.
Something giving you something to think about.
Yeah,
something different to think about rather than just
you've got a
the
thought pattern
noise
about
of the radio.
What they're talking about.
Yeah.
And while it's top of mind, what are some of those podcasts that you listen to for those that might be listening or watching this podcast?
There's probably automotive related. Listen to a fair few of those. Different dad groups, or even groups in like the mental health space, like you Speak Up, Stay Chatty, or there's a few dads groups even in Tasmania. They're worth listening to, their podcasts.
Yeah, definitely. I know I've listened to a few of the Talk Hard podcasts, which have been really good. Another local podcaster here on the northwest coast of Tassie, I think based out of Devonport. Being that we are essentially a mental health podcast trying to help blokes, again, just be that 1% better. Tell us a little bit about, your mental health journey, if you can. Like obviously it's an open space. Like we just want to sort of hear, I guess, where you've been and why, I guess, what's your interest in mental health?
Yeah, definitely. I guess best way to put it is maybe a little bit of a story. My father passed suddenly from a heart attack probably 6 years ago now. I found that really difficult. I guess a lot of regret. And then had the challenges with work, expecting a child. I also had renovations to finish. I guess from that, it snowballed. It got pretty bad. The sleepless nights. Not really sure how to get out of a hole. I guess going into the story a bit more, I actually had some physical issues, as in lay down at night. Felt like someone was sitting on your chest. I guess from that, the learnings were you need to know when to ask for help. I found it really difficult, especially when I didn't even know what was going on with myself. So I actually went and saw the doctor. And from that, the same day, I was sent out to the ER at the hospital. Suspected heart attack at like 30 years old, 28 years old, I think it was. Anyway, specialist help and found there was nothing wrong. But ended up getting referred to a counsellor and had a lot of lessons learned from there. Different ways of managing what was going on and what the triggers were, what the signs were, and ways to deal with it. So getting more into exercise, just knowing when to say no or enough is enough. I can't take on any more.
And that obviously was a really hard lesson for you. And I guess for me as well, like for those that don't know, probably one of my best friends. So hearing all that kind of stuff coming from you at the time was really tough. And it was at that time that I was looking to obviously start like Man Up Taz and whatnot. And it was always front of mind at that point. So I think a lot of people as well, like not to sort of downplay, I guess, what you've said, but it's common that so many blokes are probably having those physical symptoms and not really relating or even knowing that they're purely from like a mental health sort of basis. And the importance of chatting to a GP or a counsellor, or even just acknowledging that they're there and they're real, is really important. So, yeah, thank you for sharing. So, I guess to continue on, like if you're happy to, like what's sort of been your recovery journey from that, and perhaps some of your reflections from that process from there forward and to where you're at now.
There's a lot of things that I did learn. I probably don't follow them as such now. Probably do a bit of a terrible job, really, but I know when I'm stressed. I know when I've got too much going on, and when to ask for help, like even if it's from your partner or I think she's probably a bit more aware now that she knows what's going on because we went through that journey together.
And I know, sorry to interrupt, but it just got me thinking when you were sort of talking about your partner as well and reflecting on your story about having a newborn on the way and me sort of going through that as well at the moment. Do you feel like some of that pressure of being a dad, as well as everything else, was in there at all?
I think it's the fear of the unknown.
Yeah. Yep.
First child, you don't know what to expect. And it doesn't matter how many books you read or how many mates you talk to have got kids. You really don't know what to expect. You feel like you do, but you end up just making it up day by day. But
you do have situations present themselves to you. You're like, this wasn't in the books. What the fuck do I do?
Yeah, exactly right. And you may choose a solution, and it probably won't go well. And you learn from it. And there's a lot of things in parenting that you learn from, and you make mistakes as long as you reflect on it and maybe try better next time.
Number 2 doesn't happen the same as number 1.
No.
You'd be 100% more chill now.
Yeah.
I'm not going to break him. He'll be right.
Approached it totally differently. So, knew half what to expect. But, again, second child, they're totally different. Your approach to things is very different. They learn from the first one, so there's some things you can deal with the same, but a different solution. I guess speaking about having children, I probably didn't find it so bad coming up to it, but dealing with, I shouldn't call it the fallout, but like your postnatal, like things like that. As a husband or a partner, there's things that you experience that they experience very differently. And I found it very hard to support her with the challenges that she had because you don't see it the same way. You don't have the same feelings. You don't have the same experiences.
You found that you try and pick up the pieces around the house and do lots of other things as well, and you sort of, whether you feel maybe not valued as much doing that, but you're not sure what else to do. Like, I'm not a very good supportive person. I need to work on that. It's something that I need to do. But I'll just go hell for leather and do heaps of stuff around the house to try and, I'm like, oh, I'm doing something. I'm doing something really good. Why isn't this good?
And they don't want that.
It's sort of hard. I don't know. It's so hard to know what they want sort of sometimes. And they're going through like a massive journey, like way, way harder than what I think we have to go through.
Yep.
And then we're just stuck trying to find this balance and it doesn't work. And probably it just all comes down to communicating. I never sat down and said, hey, what would you like? I never did that. Whereas I look back on it now and I'm like, well, that would have resolved. That would have made it a fair bit easier. I should have just done that. But, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? You should do that, Aaron.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I've been like, same thing with you too. Like, shit would be going, like the whole place would be going to pieces, and you're like, let's run around and pick up the pieces and put the house back together and all this sort of stuff. And that's not what Rose wanted. No. She'd be like, she just wants you to sit down and give her a hug or something like that. It's like, well, yeah, but they've got things to do, but
Yeah.
it's just
take
differences
the
in.
child for like an hour. Just give me a break.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not to digress again, but I guess to come back to our original point of that that 1% better every day, and you spoke about the importance of sort of having that plan, I guess, knowing what your priorities are and prioritizing. Blokes are very keen, and I know I'm one to just have an instruction manual on how to actually do that. Give us a quick run through. Like, what does that look like to you? Is it? I've heard people talking about like journaling and brain dumping and that kind of stuff. Do you have a process?
Oh, that's a tough one. I wouldn't say there's like a written way to do things. I think you can get caught up in like a situation, and that's what I'll probably struggle with the most. Is like emotions are high. You deal with something in a way you think is best at the time, but then reflect on it, and it probably wasn't the best.
And I mean, we're talking here now from like doesn't even need to be a mental health or like a parenting sort of point of view. I'm assuming like you're just talking just as a stress mitigation tool, like knowing where you're at.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's probably what I was trying to lead into. Is I get probably not down in the dumps, but I get a bit annoyed with myself, and I guess that's where probably the mental health side of it comes in. That I can stew on things for a long time, reflecting on like how I dealt with a screaming kid in Kmart or whatever it was. Walk out to the car with after the situation's been handled. I'm like, well, I dealt with it the best way I could, but was that the best way? I find myself thinking a lot about the long-term effects maybe of how I deal with things, or how it's not just dealing with situations, it's how you raise your kids. Like, there's so many little things that you can do that can either affect them for better or worse in the long run. And I do reflect on that a lot, and sometimes I could probably spend too long thinking about it. But
And I think a big thing to
we're
call
all
it.
human.
Yeah, and that's where I was going to go. Like, I think a big thing on that point was, and I can't remember where I was talking about it last, but we're reflecting on this point that at what age do people stop receiving input or feedback from parents or people around them and whatever, and then they're just expected to just know how to adult and just know how to be have all their shit together. Like, I think, from personal reflection as a 33-year-old, I've still got no fucking clue what I'm doing. Like, everything is just a flying by the seat of the pants kind of thing. It's a doing what you think is right at the time. And if it's not right, whatever you learn and you try not to do it again.
It's the difference between me at 20 and me at 32 is back when I was 20, I was like, I had to get everything figured out. I'm 32. I know I haven't got everything figured out, and I know that everyone else doesn't have it either. Like, some people put the image out there that they have got everything sorted, but there'll be something they haven't got 100% down, and you just got to be easy on yourself, because it's not not everyone's got their shit together 100%.
Yeah,
And that comes back to a lot of just being content with what it is, I think, too. And like, I'm the same. I especially with the kids, about, oh no, sure, I've growled at them then. I didn't really have a reason to, but you've already done it. I'm not going to change it. Like, sweating on it just sucks and it just drags you down. Like, I don't really have any tools as such for when I'm in that. I don't dwell on things like that too much. I can see how people do, and it's easily done, but it's sort of just, it's not value adding at all. So I just try and push it aside when I do get that feeling, as hard as I can, as hard as it is, because it's not improving the situation at all.
I think everyone just wants to be the best parent they can.
Yeah.
And that's why I probably dwell too much on it. And
Yeah.
maybe that's something I need to look at and try and find a way. It's just, you just try and be the best parent you can and raise your kids how you think they should be raised. But no one's perfect. We all make mistakes.
Definitely.
good point. And look, we're getting towards the end of today's episode. So if you could just quickly, I guess, give us a little bit of a summary of if you could give one piece of advice to 18-year-old Jonathan that sort of about mental health, about anything that we've sort of spoken about today, what would it be?
There's probably a lot of things that I think about when you ask that, but I guess breaking it down to a simplistic form is life can take a lot of different directions. It always has challenges. Everyone has different challenges. Everyone deals with things different ways. There's no right or wrong way. I guess there's things you can learn from. But I guess the main thing is to recognise or identify when you need support or help, and know when to ask for it. So whether it's taking a mental health first aid course, there's a lot you can learn from something like that. But just know when you're stressed, when you've got too much going on, and find a way to tone it back.
Awesome. Very good message, mate. Thank you very much. And just thanks for coming on. I know that everyone that will listen to this will take, a good amount of information away from it. But yeah, there's so much there to unpack. We'll leave it at that. Thanks very much for coming on, mate. And yeah, that's it for this week's episode. Cheers.
Thanks, John. Thank you. Thanks very much.